was surfing the internet one night when I was feeling particularly bored, when I came across a rather strange website. The cover image was a picture of a guy and a girl cuddling in bed with a big smile on their faces. This made me think it was some sort of dating service, but it had a rather odd name. Cuddle Me. This struck me as very curious. I mean, I used to date on Tinder, but this seemed like something new, as basically, it was that a woman could be hired by the hour to come to your house and cuddle with you. On the site, there were listings of women with provocative profile pictures, and each had different hourly rates. I've been single for quite some time, so I had some idea of what this would really be like. I wish I had stopped right there. I kept scrolling down the page and saw that there was a large catalog of girls offering their services as snugglers, or I guess that's what they were. As I was looking at the various options, I noticed a girl named Amaya who really caught my eye. She was cute and had a lovely smile. She wasn't the typical super thin girl. Rather, she was a bit plump and curvy, very natural, and the truth is that I really like curvy women, but of course without exaggerating, and best of all, she only charged $15 an hour. This made me remember that I had some cash in my hand, so I called the number below. "Hi, do you want me to give you some hugs?" A voice answered me from the other side of the line. I immediately disconnected the call and my heartbeat accelerated. Holy cow, the website is not a fake. What do I do now? Suddenly a message popped up on my phone. It was from the same number. "Send your address after making the first hour payment. I will be there in the blink of an eye." I live alone in a third-floor apartment where no one cares about anyone, so with bated breath I gave him the address and paid him $15 through the page. Immediately after that, a new text message appeared. "Thanks. Can't wait to see you." At that moment, I looked around and realized that my apartment was a mess. I jumped off my computer and started cleaning my room. I took a quick shower, and as I stepped out with my towel on, someone knocked on my door. Oh God, she's here. I ran out, stumbled and slid forward, and almost slammed my teeth into the door, completely forgetting to put my clothes on first. When I finally opened the door, I almost fainted from shock. Standing in front of me was a huge middle-aged woman, stuffed into a bright pink dress and mounted on red stilettos. "You should hold her tight lest you drop her." I immediately looked down and blushed with embarrassment to see that she was still in the towel. "I'm sorry, come in please," I told him. I was really shocked. I mean, she wasn't a normal curvy girl as she looked in her pictures. Amaya was really obese and her figure looked nothing like her profile picture. And not that I want to discriminate anyone, but this was far from what I expected. Just to give you an idea, her waist was so big that she got stuck in the frame of the small door of my apartment. "This damn door," she growled as she got stuck in the frame. She stretched her hands toward me and said, "Can you pull me, please?" I grabbed her hands and pulled her inward, using a lot of force to get her unstuck. She was very obese and definitely much older than in the pictures. She didn't even look like the same person. When I was finally able to unbolt her from the door, her flaps of fat fell all over me as we fell to the floor. "Ah, God, you're so heavy," I let out as her huge body crushed me. "What did you just call me?" he said as he struggled to his feet, pinning me with a look full of anger and hatred. I looked at her face from a very close distance and noticed the huge amount of makeup she had on. I was so shocked. "What the hell are you looking at, huh?" she screamed in my face. I couldn't believe what was going on. At what point had I gotten myself into all that mess? I said, "Hey, this was all a mistake." "Okay, I didn't mean to waste your time, but please, I need you to leave." "How dare you ask me that? Do you know who I am? I'm the most requested girl on the app, the prettiest, the one everyone wants to cuddle with, and you're telling me to leave?" She kept approaching me in an intimidating manner and actually looked very angry. It was only then that I realized that in addition to her large bulk, she was also very tall, even taller than me. Trying to appease her anger a bit, I said, Yes, sure you are, I have no doubt, but I just changed my mind. I just don't think I'm ready for this, that's all. Look, I can give you $15 more for all this trouble, do you think? She didn't even let me finish and suddenly pushed me backwards, causing me to trip over the couch behind me. And in doing so, she pounced on top of me, leaving me completely squashed between the sponge and her huge body. This woman was huge in every way. I started kicking and struggling, trying to get her off me, but it was no use. My body was being squeezed against the couch and my face was buried between her huge breasts, so I couldn't breathe. I was suffocating. As this huge woman lay on top of me, literally crushing me with her huge body, she began to tell me things like, "This is so you can see what real flesh feels like, not the pile of bones I'm sure you're used to." My life began to flash before my eyes and I cursed the moment I found that stupid website. As I felt myself on the verge of passing out from suffocation, after what seemed like an hour, but was surely no more than 20 or 30 seconds, she turned her body awkwardly, falling to the floor and finally releasing me from her mammoth weight. At that moment, I took the biggest breath of air of my life and began to gasp for air, feeling the life return to my body. I looked to my side and was now struggling to get up off the floor. Still struggling to catch my breath, I stood up and tried to pull away. But then she grabbed me by one leg and made me fall to the floor. Then she talked me back towards her and tried to climb over me once again. But this time I managed to wriggle out of her grip and ran to the kitchen. She takes a knife from the drawer, and as I turned around, I realized that my direction was coming. So I pointed the knife at her and literally told her that if she didn't leave my apartment right now, I was going to gut her. She stopped dead in her tracks and threw her hands up in the air saying, "Hey, take it easy. I was just playing with you a moment ago, don't get mad." Playing with me? She literally almost killed me, the son of a... And now she says she was playing. Hearing this, I had to use all the self-control I had in my body not to throw myself on top of this psycho and carry out my threat. Instead, I told her with gritted teeth and very visible anger on my face to get the hell out immediately if I didn't want to make her the protagonist of a tragedy. My anger was probably so visible that her smile froze completely and she immediately walked into the living room, grabbed her purse and stormed out of my apartment. I didn't want to call the police about what happened because I really didn't know what I was going to tell them. Plus, I was a little embarrassed to admit that I had contacted this woman through that demon page. I knew I was going to sound like a pathetic, desperate guy who had to pay for a stranger's hugs. And this became even more clear to me a few minutes after the incident, when I called my best friend to tell him what happened and vent, and the asshole thought the situation was hilarious. I'm sure many of you also found what happened to me funny, but believe me, it wasn't funny at all. When I say I almost died at the hands of this sick woman, I'm serious. I think if she had taken a couple of seconds longer to get off on me, I wouldn't be telling you this right now. Have you ever met someone on a dating app? I know my friends have met a lot of people that way. Some of them are even in relationships now, but unfortunately my experience was totally different. I went on a few dates with other guys, but while there were a few that could be considered acceptable, most of them were pretty boring. Most of the people I dated were either completely silent while we ate or did whatever, or they just couldn't stop talking about themselves. I think it needs to be noted that there was never a second date with any of them. Anyway, all these terrible dates I had in the past are nothing compared to my worst date. The date where I went out with a stalker psychopath, a person who, if I let him, could have done me a lot of harm. Everything started to happen normally. I was using several dating apps, but this one was my favorite, as it connected me with people I had crossed paths with. The guy I was talking to called himself Rex, was very nice, and, from what he told me, was as passionate about movies as I was. However, despite being very nice, I must admit that I was surprised at how insistent he was, a red flag that I was not able to see at first. He was adamant in his proposal to meet at his house to watch a movie that same night. Normally, I would have said no, but earlier that day, another guy had canceled on me, and I must admit I was still a little angry about that. So whether it was because of that or whatever, the point is I accepted. But before I went to his house, which was in an apartment building downtown, I told my whole family where Rex lived. It's a precaution I always had when I went out on a date with whomever, not just with online dating, but with those especially. When we finally met, I felt like I had made a good decision. Rex was extremely friendly and very nice. He seemed very happy to see me, which I thought was kind of strange, but I chalked it up to him probably just being nervous. His apartment was not very large, but I suppose it was sufficient for someone living alone. He kindly invited me into his living room, where he had set out a pot of popcorn, a couple of glasses of soda, and some treats. I was also struck by the size of the TV in his living room. It was really big, which made a perfect environment to watch movies. Nothing to envy to the cinema. I could tell he was really a movie fan. We put on the movie we had talked about before we met, and it was right at that moment when the nightmare started. I wasn't more than 5 minutes into the movie when I turned my head and noticed Rex staring at me. At first I thought it was a coincidence, that I had just caught him looking at me, and that he must really like me a lot, but that wasn't the case. Looking at him out of the corner of my eye, I realized that he really didn't stop staring at me. At that moment, I also realized how huge his eyes were, but that was the least of it. The really creepy thing was the obsessive look he had on me all the time. I began to feel very uncomfortable. Was it my imagination, or did he not even blink? Even that was possible. "Hey, are you watching the movie? Your focus seems to be elsewhere." "Yes, of course, I'm watching it," she told me. I couldn't believe it. Even after I called him on it, his gaze never left me. I mentioned it again, but honestly, I was pretty scared now. I just wanted to leave as soon as possible. I tried to push the matter aside and finish the movie so as not to arouse suspicion. The movie went on and on for that hour and a half, and Rex never took his eyes off me ever. He saw absolutely nothing of the movie, only me, and he didn't stop for a second from creepily staring at me. As soon as it was over, I told him I had to go home, that my mother had a health problem, and I had to constantly take care of her. I politely apologized, thanked him for everything, and told him we could meet another day and get something to eat. At first he agreed, and was quick to open the door for me, but he, increasingly insistent that I stay, kept telling me that he had had a great time, that it had been the best date of his life, and that he wanted to see me again. I lied to him, and agreed to a second date, while the hairs on the back of my neck were completely bristling as I saw him still looking at me with a terrifying psycho face. There was no telling what he would do if I turned him down, so I agreed, as if I would have liked our meeting too, but nothing could have been further from the truth. I took a bus home, refusing his constant offers to accompany me to my building, and as soon as I got back, I threw myself on my bed and turned on my cell phone. When I logged into my WhatsApp, I saw over 20 messages and 10 missed calls from Rex. The messages started out fine, but the longer I didn't respond to him, his messages became more violent and were accompanied by a frenzy of calls. This guy was completely insane, and I was honestly too terrified. Being a huge fan of horror and suspense movies, I have seen stories like this many times on the big screen, and they usually always end tragically. Not that I'm confusing fact with fiction, but his attitude was nothing short of that of an obsessed psychopath. And that was the last type of person I wanted to have around, so I simply blocked him out. But I felt so overwhelmed from holding back fear for so long. And now to come across this, that I just started crying. Not only had it been a scary date, but this man was also totally insane. A few hours later, my mother knocked on my bedroom door and woke me up. It was midnight and she was about to go to bed, but she couldn't find her cell phone, so she asked me to call her. As she called, I heard her cell phone, but it seemed to be quite far away. I followed the sound of Mom's phone until I reached our yard. Now the phone was sitting on one of the little tables we always have in the yard. As soon as I grabbed the cell phone, it rang, and out of curiosity I opened it. It was a number that my mom didn't have in her address book, but I recognized it immediately. It was Rex's number. The message said to look at my mother's photo gallery, and when I opened it, I saw the last 5 pictures taken. The first 2 were of my mom in the kitchen preparing dinner, but the other 3 made my heart almost freeze. These were of me sleeping. At that moment, I almost dropped my phone on the floor. I'm sure she managed to make sure I didn't notice and followed me home. Finally, I received another message. This one said, "You should come in. You're going to catch a cold." I certainly felt cold, but this had nothing to do with the weather. I ran up to the house and locked the door, went upstairs and into my mother's room. Seeing me come in, panicked and past the door lock, my mother became very worried and asked me what was going on. I told her everything, and together we checked all the corners to see if anyone was hiding. Then we called the police and begged them to come as soon as possible. The man might not be spying on us from outside. He could be anywhere in the house, and that terrified me. About 10 minutes later, the police arrived and my father behind them. The officers searched the whole house from beginning to end and found no one. A couple of weeks went by and I heard absolutely nothing from Rex. I assumed that when he saw that I had called the police, he had given up on me, but I was very wrong. One night I was coming home late from a party at a friend's house. Tonight, one of our friends offered to give 4 of us a ride home. It was close to midnight when my friend dropped me off in front of my house, and as I walked to the door going through my purse to get my keys, I felt someone grab me from behind and cover my mouth with some kind of handkerchief that had a strong odor. At first I tried to scream, but my screams were silenced by the huge hand that covered my mouth holding the handkerchief. Suddenly I began to feel very dizzy and my vision was darkening, but before I completely lost consciousness, I could hear my father's voice screaming from the door, and the last thing I remember is the sound of my body hitting the floor. I woke up a few hours later in the hospital, where I found out that Rex was the person who attacked me when I was arriving home. He was trying to kidnap me, and for that he soaked a handkerchief with a substance that makes people lose consciousness. And then he took me to his car, which was parked near my house. Rex had been stalking me for days, waiting for the perfect moment to carry out his plan. However, he didn't count on the fact that my dad would be waiting for me at that time, and when he was discovered, he simply left me lying on the lawn and tried to run away. But my dad called the police and they apprehended him a half hour later. To this day, I have no idea what Rex's plans really were, but upon searching his house, the cops found ropes, knives, duct tape, and a number of other creepy items that they presume would be used to hold me captive. Rex was sentenced to several years in prison, but after only 2 months in jail, he took his own life by hanging himself with his own shirt. I would like to pretend that I am a good person and say that I felt sorry for him, but in reality I felt a great relief when I learned this, because Rex's sentence was 7 years, and honestly, I would never have felt safe knowing that at any moment that psychopath would get out of prison and could attack me again. After this horrible experience, I completely deleted my profile on the dating app and have never had a horrible experience like that again. I have never told this story to anyone in my family. And how do you do that? How do you tell your family that you were almost kidnapped when you were 11 years old? Back in 2005, when Facebook was a perfect unknown. The most popular social network for everyone was MySpace, and since there wasn't much knowledge about the dangers kids could face on social networks, my parents never saw a problem with me having a profile on it. It was a normal summer day for me. I got up around noon, went for a bike ride with my brother, then came home and spent most of the rest of the day in our backyard pool. Later, as it started to get dark, my brother and I went into the house, and after taking a shower, I decided to check my MySpace profile real quick while I was in my room and spend some of the energy on my games there. But, as I was finishing up my energy bar Dog Wars and about to close the browser to go downstairs and play some PlayStation, I got a sudden friend request. The profile was Leah13, and it was 3 hours away from nowhere in Kentucky. I clicked on the name because I didn't know any Leah, not even a Rosalia or an Aaliyah, or any girl whose name might suggest that pseudonym. The girl looked to be about 11 or 12 years old like me. I asked myself, why would this girl want to be friends with me? I almost ignored her, but in the end I accepted the request, and without much else to do, I sent her a message asking her a simple question. Do I know you? From somewhere she told me that we had never met, but that she was friends with one of my friends, Dylan. I checked her profile and saw that she and Dylan had indeed shared many common interests and were on each other's friends list, so I could control what she said. I didn't message Dylan to ask him about her. I was a naive and trusting child, so I saw no reason to doubt what she was saying. For the next few weeks, I talked to her every night for no less than 3 hours. We usually just chatted about music, school, TV, and stuff like that. Typical kid stuff. I didn't really think anything of it other than being friends on MySpace, until one day she said she liked me. I laughed, thinking she just meant friends like each other, but she clarified that she meant she had feelings for me and wanted to meet me in person. I lived quite far away from her, so I didn't really see how this could be possible. I knew my parents weren't willing to take me with a girl I had met online, and honestly I wouldn't want them to, as my parents were very conservative and I never felt like I could talk to them about this kind of thing. I just didn't have that kind of confidence, so I shrugged it off and told her it would be hard for us to meet, because as much as I love riding bikes, a 3-hour bike ride to a part of the state I had barely seen in pictures was not something I was comfortable with and thought was even possible. She was very understanding and said she at least wanted to talk on the phone instead of just texting. I agreed, but told her to never call my number and to always let me be the one to call her because I didn't want my parents to answer and want to ask questions. She seemed to understand perfectly, so I called her back. The first time I got her dad answering, and he spoke to me in a curt tone, although it was weird because I had the phone with me on the computer and I told him I was calling her, and she said she had the phone with her too. But I didn't think anything of it. I told him Zach was calling me and that I was looking for Leah. Then he told me to hold on for a second, and then there was a crackling sound on the phone like someone was trying to make it ring. I didn't really think anything of it because, as I told you, I was 12 years old and didn't have that kind of malice yet, so I just didn't give it any importance or stop to think about it. I just wanted to talk to Leah. After a few seconds, I heard a slightly high-pitched, "Hello." It was Leah. We talked for a few minutes, basically the same things we were talking about in the chat. Then she said she had to go because her dad was also expecting a call, so I shrugged again and told her to just text me so we could talk again later. Leah and I kept texting back and forth for a while, and before I knew it, it was almost the end of the summer. That's when Leah told me that she felt very sad, since the summer was about to end and she still hadn't been able to meet me in person, so she brought up an idea. She said there was an end of summer event at a lake near my house. She mentioned that her family used to go there sometimes and that she could probably convince them to go for the event that year. A few nights later, she let me know that they had also arranged with her parents and that she was super excited to finally meet me. She also told me that she was going to kiss me as soon as she saw me, which made me blush. I did my best to make it seem like it was no big deal, like I was some stud who had kissed a lot of girls before, but I wasn't, obviously. I was totally excited to finally kiss a girl, and it was only a few nights away. I had a hard time sleeping the next 2 nights and stayed awake most of the time talking to Leah. We were both excited and couldn't wait to get to know each other. It was a magical experience the night before the day of our meeting. I think we stayed up until 8 a.m. talking. So the day had finally arrived, and after an early afternoon bike ride and a brief swim, our family got in the car ready to get to the event. My dad decided that we would ride in the van so my brother and I could take our bikes to the lake with us. There were lots of bike trails, and we always really enjoyed doing rides there. I told my brother that I wasn't going to be with him all afternoon, as I had arranged to meet another friend, but would catch up with him later. He wanted to come with me as all little brothers do, but I quickly convinced him that he wouldn't want to come with me because those kids were mean and unbearable, and I would only go with them because one of them was my friend. Fortunately, he was fine with it and didn't ask any questions. After that, about an hour later, the sun was already starting to set, and my brother said he would go back to meet our parents anyway, as he didn't like driving in the dark because he had a habit of crashing. So when I ventured out on my own, now unhindered, I headed for the picnic area where Leah had agreed to meet me. I sat at one of the tables with my bike leaning against the side. I was there so long that I started to get worried and was ready to leave because the fireworks were about to start, and Leah still hadn't shown up. I got up and jumped off the picnic table, and just as I did, a rusty old white pickup truck pulled up next to the tables. The man inside reached across the cab to roll down the window and gave me a strange smile, telling me that he was Leah's dad and that he was going to take me to her. I started to feel strange about the situation, so I just stared at him and told him to turn off the engine, thinking that maybe I couldn't hear him over the noise. The man got out of the truck and told me he was there to take me to Leah. "Get in," he said, opening the passenger door and motioning for me to get in. The van was full of garbage and looked very dirty. I could smell oil and other things coming out of it. As I gave him a crooked look, I told him I wasn't getting in. Then he grabbed my arm and pulled me towards the van forcibly. That's when it really hit me, and I quickly realized what this was really about. Panic started to set in as the guy said, "Get in the damn van," squeezing my arm so hard I thought he was going to break it. I began to struggle to break free of his grip as the man dragged me into the cab of the old truck. I managed to break free for a moment, but he came up behind me and grabbed me again, so I did the only thing I could think of to repel a grown man twice my size and probably 3 times my age. I reared back and kicked him directly in the testicles. I didn't bother waiting to see how he had handled the blow. I just ran and got on my bike, pedaling with all my might back across the lake to where my family was. He didn't follow me. At least I don't think he did. And if he had, surely he must have seen my dad and held back from doing anything stupid against me, as my dad was a pretty big guy and definitely not someone you wanted to fight with, especially not after he'd had a few beers. Fortunately, I didn't see this disgusting man again all night, and when I got home I went to text Leah to tell her what a jerk her dad was, but the profile had disappeared. I saw Dylan just before school started, and he said he had no idea who Leah was and didn't even remember adding her on MySpace. It wasn't until a few years later that I realized how terribly close I had come to being kidnapped, and God knows what that man wanted to do to me. Right when I had just finished college and was living in a 1-bedroom townhouse, I met a guy on Plenty of Fish. At the time, I wasn't exactly smart about my online activities. Not that I've really changed, but at least now I'm not as dumb as I was then. Anyway, he seemed like a really decent guy. He was really good looking, Said he had a good job, had good teeth, and seemed to really care about his personal health. Pretty much all the things I'd normally look for in a guy. I'm not a superficial person, but I really like to look presentable, and if I'm with someone, I'd like him to care about his appearance, and to always look presentable himself as well, which is something that's very important to me, especially since first impressions are the most important. After about a week of chatting online, we agreed to meet. We arranged to meet at a restaurant in the center of the city, which was very far from where I lived, so I had to leave the house well in advance to be on time. Just when I got there, I had noticed him standing at the door, and I immediately noticed his appearance, and the truth is that he met my expectations, and he was as handsome as in his profile picture. He received me very kindly, with a greeting on the cheek. Then he opened the door for me, and also pulled my chair when we sat at the table. The evening went very well. We dined deliciously, chatted a bit, albeit on rather superficial topics, but all normal for a first date. At the end of the evening, we said goodbye again with a kiss on the cheek, and I let him know what a good time I had and got into my car and started to drive away. I realized right away that he was following me because of the distance to my house. I didn't panic right away because it's such a big city. Maybe he would turn off the freeway or something, but he didn't. This seemed a little strange to me, but I continued on my way. As my exit was approaching, I looked in the rearview mirror and realized it was still following me, so I decided not to take it. I just kept driving. I skirted all the way around town on the freeway and he stayed right behind me the whole time. I was really starting to panic a little, so I decided to go to my friend's house instead of my own. As I took the exit, I noticed that he didn't, so I had a moment to breathe and just said, "Okay, screw it, I'll go home." I took the exit ramp back onto the freeway and started back down the road toward my house. As soon as I got there, I showered and was getting ready for bed, when all of a sudden I started feeling really silly and started thinking things like, am I overreacting? Maybe I should ask him if he was following me. What if his house is just down that way? Anyway, a lot of things started to parade through my overactive imagination, or so I thought. I finally decided I was going to text him and just say, "Hey, I had a good time tonight, good night." But just as I started typing, suddenly a text came on my phone with a picture of my car right outside my house. I almost died at the sight of it. My heart jumped out of my chest and I immediately started shaking. As you may have noticed, I am a rather nervous and even somewhat paranoid woman. I didn't know how to act or what to say. This completely threw me off, but then she texts me and says, "I didn't know you lived across the street, so we're neighbors and all." There was a huge apartment complex on the corner of my house, so maybe that's where he lived, I don't know. What I do know is that I went to peek outside and there he was, standing in front of my house like he was waiting for me. I opened the door and greeted him, still feeling a little nervous. Then he asked me if he could come in and if I still wanted to hang out, but I quickly told him I was really exhausted and would rather fall asleep soon because it had been a long day. He had a small smile on his face, but it froze when I told him this, so he nodded and walked across the street back to his car. The next morning I woke up to go to work, and as I was about to get into my car, I saw to my horror that my windshield had been smashed. The doors were open and 2 tires were completely slashed. As I was assessing the damage to my vehicle, completely horrified, the guy came out of his car with 2 coffees and was like, "Oh, I thought I'd surprise you with morning coffee, but I see you've already been surprised first." Oh my God, who did this? I looked at him completely shocked and unable to disguise my startled face. I immediately pulled my cell phone out of my purse and dialed the police and reported the damage to my vehicle. The guy offered to give me a ride, but something in my gut told me not to get in his car. So I politely declined, and before he could insist, I called my boss and started telling him about the situation, avoiding any interaction with him. I explained to my boss that I wasn't going to be there until after the police arrived, and he agreed. All that time he stayed with me, but when the police finally arrived, he started acting really suspicious. He walked away from the scene and began to hide slyly on the other side of his car. I filed the report and the police basically told me to wait for a response from the insurance, and then they left. But just as they rounded the corner, all I heard was the siren going really loud, and then I saw the police car lights on. I was very confused, but then I heard the officers yell, "Hold it right there! Put your hands in the air and get on your knees right now." I ran out through the yard to get a better look at what was going on, and that's when I saw a cop with his gun drawn, pointing directly at this creepy guy I came out with. And then 2 other officers came over, picked him up off the ground and put him in the squad car. Before the cop pointing the gun at him got into his squad car, I talked to him, and then he explained to me that he was an ex-con wanted for parole violation, harassment, sexual abuse, assault with a deadly weapon, fraud, and aggravated assault. Or so much as I remember of the litany of charges hanging over this man. I was absolutely shocked, and obviously my mind began to spin the number of possible horrific things that could have happened to me at the hands of this criminal, had I agreed to open my front door or get into his car. This happened in 2008. I was 20 years old at the time, living in a small town outside of Washington and attending a nearby college. She was home for the summer, and at the time she was not taking summer classes. At the time I had an account on several dating sites, but I wasn't looking for anything serious. One day in early July, I received a message from someone named Karen Evans about getting together and meeting in person. She was a year younger than me, lived in Tacoma, and attended Everest College. I checked out her profile and she seemed pretty normal. She had several photos in addition to her icon, was interested in art and literature, majored in math, liked alternative rock, and played soccer. The woman in the photos was very attractive. She looked quite real, and it also looked like we had some things in common, so I accepted without further ado. We messaged each other on the site first, but then talked about how we could have dinner at a local Italian restaurant, and then go for a walk. I thought that sounded good, and suggested that we meet at the restaurant on Saturday at 7. She agreed, and then asked me the favor of picking her up at her apartment, as she didn't have a car to use at the time because she had recently been in an accident. This was a little strange to me, and I wondered why I couldn't ask someone to drive her, but I stupidly agreed to pick her up and she gave me her address. This was our first date, and I wanted to be seen as a gentleman, but that turned out to be the worst mistake I have ever made. Karen and I then exchanged phone numbers, but we spoke on the phone only once, and it was brief, just discussing the details of the date again. I would pick her up at her house around 6:30, and we would leave for the restaurant at 7. It was definitely a female voice on the phone, and it didn't sound old or anything, so I really wasn't worried about anything. That Saturday I got directions to her house and set out. She lived in a fairly nice section of town, in a 3-story house that was a condo type of place. I guess she informed me that her landlord owned the building. He lived on the 2nd floor and rented out the top 2 floors, and she lived on the 3rd floor. I remember there was a set of stairs on the side of the townhouse where there was a door on each floor, but the 2nd floor also had a front door. It was kind of an odd configuration that caught my attention a bit, but I didn't think anything of it. I went up the side stairs to the 3rd floor and knocked on the door, but she didn't come out right away as I would have expected. On the contrary, it felt like she waited there forever, until about 10 minutes later, a rather large, middle-aged man with the strangest look in the world on his face opened the door. I don't even know how else to describe him, as there was nothing odd about his appearance or attire, but his attitude. Now my warning bells were starting to ring, but I guess I had the idiotic thought that maybe he was her father, so I foolishly said, "Is Karen here?" However, there was something about this man that I didn't like at all, and it was like every fiber in my body was screaming at me to get out of there. I decided to listen to my instinct and got ready to get the hell out of there without even waiting for an answer. I tried to turn around, but he literally grabbed my arm and blurted out, "I'm Karen," and gave me a creepy smile. I was smaller, thinner, and much younger than him, so it would have been pretty hard for me to defend myself from that guy. I kept trying to get away to no avail, so I did the only thing that came to mind to try to get to safety. I started screaming for help. As I screamed at the top of my lungs, "Help! Help! They want to kidnap me!" He repeatedly tried to push me through the door and tried to punch me in the face a couple of times, but fortunately what I didn't have in strength I had in agility, so I was able to dodge him, and seeing that I couldn't force my way in and probably had already alerted the whole neighborhood with my screams, the man let me go. I didn't hesitate to take this opportunity to run out of there at full speed, and fortunately, he didn't try to follow me, so I immediately got in my car and went home. I was frustrated that no one had heard me and tried to help me. I was scared to death, naturally. I didn't know if I should go to the police and tell them or even what they would do if I did. That night, I told my roommate the whole story when I got home. I knew I was going on a date, but I didn't know the circumstances and obviously didn't know about the guy who was waiting for me. My roommate convinced me to report it to the police and told me I should take pictures of Karen's messages if I still had them, just in case. That same night, I went to the local police station and reported the whole thing to them. I also provided them with the photos of the messages. I had a feeling they weren't taking me seriously, but they said they would go to the guy's house to question him about it and had me file a report. But here's where the really crazy part comes in. The police called me on the phone the next morning and told me to stop by the police station because they had some information about the guy. Obviously I did, and then they told me that the guy was apparently missing. They talked to the owner of the property, and he told them that the guy must have left in the middle of the night because his car wasn't parked that morning. I guess the landlord had a key and opened the door to the apartment for them, even though they didn't have a search warrant. Then they saw that all his stuff was apparently there. The owner told them that he didn't know much about the guy, but that he seemed like a completely normal person. He just didn't get out of his apartment much. He also provided them with his name, and thanks to that, the officers did a background check and nothing. The police advised me to delete my account on the website and suggested I change my phone number just in case, so I did. I was told at the time that there was not much more they could do. I never received any follow-up or update on my report and never met the guy again, of course, so I still have a lot of questions. Who did I talk to on the phone? It wasn't his pre-recorded call because he addressed me by name and knew what he was talking about. Who was the girl in the pictures? I don't know where she got them from, and I didn't know about the reverse image search at the time. And finally, what were her plans? It was all too strange, but maybe I will never get the answers to these questions. I want to start this story by saying that this story happened when I was much younger and less knowledgeable about the weirdos that abound in the world. Had I known what I know now, this story would have ended before it even began. This happened when I was a 16-year-old girl, got bored one day and decided to download a version of the Tinder app. I immediately started using it, and after a couple of swipes, this guy's face popped up. And what intrigued me was that he didn't have his name on his profile. The guy looked cute and completely normal. I mean, at least he didn't look like a rapper, nor was he doing weird poses. For 16-year-old me, this was enough to swipe right out of curiosity. To my surprise, we matched right away, and we also immediately started talking. It all started with an ordinary conversation. "Hello, my name is Dick, and yours?" "My name is Aurora. Nice to meet you, Dick." "The pleasure is completely mine, Aurora. And tell me, what do you do for fun?" From there, we started talking, and after doing a little research, it turned out that he went to the same high school as me. and shortly after that we arranged to meet that weekend. At this point, Dick seemed like a cool guy to me, and I was really looking forward to meeting him. Saturday came and Dick showed up about 20 minutes late and was bringing a rose, presumably to make up for the fact that he's only about 5 feet 6 inches, which had been cleverly omitted from the pictures he had posted. I don't usually like short guys, but in this case that didn't bother me too much. I joked with him about it and we went to sit in a park in the center of town to chat. We talked for about 2 hours about everything and nothing at all, until Dick asked me if he could be so bold as to kiss me. I was flattered, but declined. However, he persisted, saying it was very important until I finally lost my temper and asked him why. He explained to me that he suffered from sex-based migraines, and that if he was deprived of sexual contact for too long, he would have an excruciating headache that would render him immobile for 48 hours. Although naive, I was not stupid enough to believe this nonsense, but after that, I simply wanted to go home and get that meeting over with as soon as possible. I made up an excuse about having to leave for I don't remember what reason, so I gave her a quick peck on the cheek and ran off to the beauty salon across the street, where the owners knew me and talked to me for an hour or so until I felt safe enough to take the bus home. I figured this would be the end of the encounter and calmly traveled home. My mother and I have never had a very good relationship, and I really didn't want to talk to her about it, so when she asked me about my day, I just ignored it and told her I had met a friend for lunch. After dinner, I went up to my room and pulled out my phone. At that point, I almost threw up everything I had for dinner. There was a Snapchat notification from Dick. My username must have been on the profile I set up on Tinder. How stupid of me. I gingerly opened it, and it was a 10-second video of him lying on his bed at home, looking dazed and confused. The caption read, "Look what you do to me." I realized he was actually faking a migraine and filming himself to send it to me. I immediately blocked the account and sat down to watch TV, but couldn't concentrate too hard. A couple of days later, a friend request came in from Dick on Facebook. Obviously, I declined it, but he sent it again. I was a little weirded out, but he seemed to have friends in common with me, and from his profile I was able to learn more about him, namely how to avoid him. The messages started coming in, and these started with things like, "I really enjoyed today. I hope we can meet again soon," and ending with gems like, "How I need you to insert my name on your list." I laughed at his choice of words and the dual purpose in them, but blocked him again. A few days passed, and then one afternoon, as I was taking my bus to school, a familiar face smiled at me from the bus stop. Sure enough, it was Dick again, this time with his friends. I didn't suspect anything, as my bus stop was across the street from the school, and I vaguely knew one of his friends. So I smiled, talked, and made jokes until my bus arrived. This was to be the first of many chance encounters with Dick, all of which I dismissed as coincidence, since he lived and went to school in the same part of town as I did. The last time I ran into him was on my way to meet a friend the week before I severely sprained my knee playing soccer. I was struggling to walk from my bus stop to where my friend with a car had agreed to meet me, and as I rounded the corner, guess what? Yes, exactly Dick. He smiled wildly and waved at me. He asked what had happened to my leg, and I told him it had been a soccer injury. He then asked where I was going. I told him I was meeting my friend. She asked what time I was going to meet her, and at that point, having had enough of the interrogation, I told her in an hour and made the pretense of leaving. But then she told me that her house was just around the corner and, putting her hand firmly on my lower back, offered that I could wait there with a cup of tea until my friend arrived. I tried to protest, saying I would be fine waiting in the cafe, but he insisted and half led or half pushed me to his house. When we got inside, I asked him if I could use the bathroom, to which he said yes and showed me. I texted my friend after locking myself in there and said that a guy I vaguely knew had let me wait at this house and that she could come pick me up from there. I didn't tell her the whole story as I didn't want to worry her or have her phone call my mother, which would have met a worse fate than Dick. He then knocked on the door, asking if I was okay. I told him yes, but that I would be a couple of minutes, and he agreed to wait for me downstairs. When I came out of the bathroom, I went downstairs to find Dick lying motionless on the living room floor. I panicked, thinking something had happened to him, and went to check his pulse, but when I bent down, his hand shot out to feel my chest through my shirt, and he croaked weakly. I swatted his hand away and tried to stand up to get him a glass of water. "I need you to insert my name. Feel me." My eyes widened like saucers as I saw that his pants, which I hadn't seen until now, were unbuttoned, and he was, well, doing things with himself, staring at me. I was scared to death and ran up the stairs. I struggled with the lock on the upper bathroom door and heard his slow footsteps approaching just as I was opening the door. Her voice called to me from across the hall. "Come on, Aurora, don't be inconsiderate. I told you it's a medical matter," she said in a plaintive voice, almost as if she was pleading. I opened the door and slammed it shut behind me. I was almost in tears, both from the pain in my knee and from the strangeness and disturbing nature of the situation. I pulled out my phone and called my friend and begged her to please hurry up. She asked me worriedly what the reason was, but I just told her once again to hurry up. A couple of minutes later, I heard my friend's car horn outside the house. Then I heard Dick call me and let me know that they had already come for me. I opened the door and limped down the stairs. I didn't even stop to look at Dick. I just got out of there as fast as I could, got into my friend's car and drove away with me, telling her everything between shaky breaths. But the strangest part of this story happened next. A couple of days later, I ran into Dick again, and he acted as if nothing had happened that day. He offered me a stick of gum and then took a bus from my bus stop. It was almost as if he didn't even remember anything about that day, and I'm sure he wished he hadn't. I haven't seen him around in some time, but that could be because he went off to college. Hopefully he stays right where he is, and I never have to bump into him again in life.